was divided not only among the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government, but between federal and state governments.
Sovereignty says there has to be some one final sense of authority, right? And federalism says, no, what we're actually doing is we're taking sovereign powers and we're dividing them among the states and the national government. Those powers are going to overlap, which means they're going to be confusing, which means there's going to be some tension and conflict and competition between the different levels of government. If there's going to be one sovereign in this system, it's really going to be the people. And this is the argument that James Wilson makes in defense of the Constitution right after the convention adjourns. So in that sense, if we think of federalism as a kind of continuous political competition, where the national government and the states are both vying with each other to attract the support of the people, and where the people have to decide, through elections and coalition building and so on, which level of government do we want to act for us at this moment?
Woodrow Wilson said that every generation had to essentially rediscover what the proper balance of power between the nation and the states was going to be. And we saw that process emerge from the very beginning.
But picking up on an earlier Federalist promise, what about the Bill of Rights?
When you get to the elections in late 1788, early 1789 to the new government, the Federalists carried those elections pretty decisively. There are strong Federalist majorities in both the House of Representatives and especially in the Senate. So when the first Congress convenes, somewhat belatedly, in the early spring of 1789, in fact, there's not much enthusiasm and not much political reason to think that the promises ostensibly made back in 1788 really need to be honored.
The Bill of Rights was submitted in the House, written by Madison, digested from 85 recommendations from the states for rights, and drawn down into this Compact 10.
Madison did not really think the Constitution needed a Bill of Rights. He certainly did not want to consider any of the other structural amendments. But he did believe that to get the government up and running on the basis of broad public consensus, it probably would be worthwhile to add amendments to the Constitution if they took only the form of a Declaration of Rights.
Just what objections did Madison have to a Bill of Rights?
He said, first of all, it's not the federal government's business to be in these areas of rights. That's for the states. Federal government has enumerated powers. That's all. They don't include this. The states deal with these matters. Second of all, he said, what he called parchment barriers, that is, little words on a piece of paper, are never going to protect anybody's rights. It's only the balance of real forces. But most important, he said, enumerate rights. You're going to limit them, because that specifies the rights you acknowledge. And therefore, you're saying these are the ones that count, but not any others. And that is not a good idea, because there are other rights that you don't happen to think of at the moment.
Madison uses the phrase to describe a Bill of Rights, it's a nauseous project. I don't really think he meant nauseous to himself, although it was a lot of work for him. I think what he essentially meant was nauseous to all his fellow members of Congress, down whose throats he was really forcing his proposed amendments.
The first four are substantive, the next four are procedural, legal procedural, but the ninth really goes to the heart of what the problem was at the time. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So in other words, it got around the problem that Madison worried about, namely that if you enumerate rights, you limit them.
The debate over the Bill of Rights in the First Federal Congress has been, on the whole, quite disappointing to scholars. So we would like to know a lot more about exactly what the framers meant by freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of conscience, the right to bear arms. We would have liked to have a fuller debate than, in fact, we got.
Another